It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today.
You better listen, my brother, 'cause if you do, you can hear there are voices still calling from across the years. And they're crying across the ocean, they're crying across the land, and they will...
Dear friends, welcome to the Labor Radio Podcast Network Profile Series, highlighting the work of our members. The growing network of over 70 shows in 4 countries serves as a one-stop shop for audiences looking for labor content. And it's a resource for labor broadcasters, podcasters, and content producers. My name is Evan Papp, and I produce Empathy Media Lab's podcast on labor, political economy, arts, and culture, and we're a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. Today, I'm speaking with Rick Smith of The Rick Smith Show. Rick, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what led you to organize labor.
So, Evan, I appreciate you taking a little time for me and highlighting the work that we do here at the Rick Smith Show. My story, of how I got to radio is, one of by accident, just fell into it. I grew up as a kid in the housing project on the west side of Cleveland. Basically, I was the white kid in the ghetto, a minority in a minority neighborhood. And how I came to labor was I saw people's lives get better. I think of the one neighbor we had. He got a job at Ford. He was a UAW member, and immediately their lives got better. The kids got secondhand bikes. They got better clothes. They got a used car. They had food at the end of the month, and then eventually they moved out. Their lives got better, and for me, the message at a very young age was union equals better life. You work hard, you play by the rules, as my mother always said, you get ahead. And that progression was important and something that was reinforced when I was a kid. So when I couldn't afford to go to college anymore, I was fortunate enough to get a good union job, which, now I look back on it, was a great union job. And that was the beginning of it. That was more than 30 years ago. And I'm happy as I can be with where I've gone.
It's awesome. And you were with the Teamsters, I believe.
I've spent 33 years carrying a union card. The Teamsters, the vast majority of it. And, the reality is one of the things I talk about on my show quite often is that ability to have a voice in where you spend the mass of your life. That empowerment, that contract, and knowing that someone has your back has. And I think that's what we've lost a lot of in this country. That sense of that we have some control. And that's why I think, unions are a vital part of what goes on these days.
And quickly before moving on, I also was born in Cleveland. Which West Side project housing were you in?
The Riverside projects over off of Puritas, right near the airport. If you've ever flown into Johns Hopkins, you probably flew right over where I lived. When I was a kid, we used to throw rocks at the planes because that's how close they got to us. But it was, again, it was another one of those housing projects where we housed poor people because, look, you can't tell now, but there were many months where we went to the cabinets and there was nothing in the cupboards. The sad reality in this country, we don't treat poor people very well. And in the 1970s, we certainly didn't do it any better than we're doing now. So again, you look at these lessons that I've learned throughout my life, and it's part of what we focus on our program.
Yeah, my grandparents on my mom's side lost their house during the Great Depression, and they were the first tenants of the the Lakeview Terrace in Cleveland, and that was built in 1937 by the Works Progress Administration. So something that we definitely need to bring back. There's a lot of housing issues today. So moving on, for those who may not be interested or aware of labor news, why do you think unions and organized labor are important, and why do you cover them?
It's important because, much like politics, it decides who gets what. When I talk about on the program, people say, why do you talk about politics? Why is this important? It comes back to something my high school government teacher said. I said, look, at the end of the day, politics is about who gets what. It's the same thing about labor unions. It's about who gets what slice of the pie, who gets the say in your hours, wages, conditions, who has say in what you endure in those hours that you spend at work. And for me, and again, going back to when I was a kid, I used to deliver the Cleveland Press. I don't know if you remember the old Cleveland Press, but they actually had a labor page where they would talk about labor victories. They had a labor reporter. I know, shocking of all shocking, major newspapers had labor reporters who would focus on the labor beat, and they would talk about, the strikes that were going on, the contract negotiations that were going on. And oh, by the way, they would talk about the wages, hours, conditions, and how people's lives were, again, back to what I said before, unions equal better lives, how things were moving forward. We're not allowed to talk about that anymore. There isn't a newspaper in this country that's got a labor page anymore. Every one of them got a business page. Every one of them's telling you how wonderful Wall Street's doing, how wonderful the CEOs are doing, how wonderful the shareholders are doing. And you know why they're doing so well? Because they're taken from the employees. There was just a great study done by the Pew Research Center that came out and said over the last 45 years, we the working people have been robbed to the tune of about $2.5 trillion a year. You want to talk about massive redistribution of wealth? That's it right there in practice. We're being robbed at every turn, and we don't even know about it because our news media doesn't focus on it at all. So the people who listen to my show and other shows on the Labor Radio Podcast Network, maybe you're going to get a little bit of that. And the more we talk to each other and the more we start talking about why it's important to get better wages, hours, and conditions, why it's important that we share in the wealth that our labor creates, maybe we'll start doing it. I had an interesting conversation with an Uber driver. And this is one of those moments where it just kind of stopped me in my tracks. Because I've talked to a couple of them over the years, and they all say, I need something to do, gives me something on the weekends. Like their lives weren't complete enough that they got to go driving my ass around. So not one of them have ever said, I'm doing it because I need the money. Nobody's ever said, hey, I got to pay the bills. And this is one of those moments where as a working person, we've got to say, look, it's about the money. The employers, they're not shy about saying it's about the money. Hey, we laid you off. No money. Why do we as working people not go, hey, it's about the money and we deserve better. We demand better. And again, one of those things, I don't want to go off all day on this, but one of those things that I think is important. Let's talk about who gets what. And let's talk about what we're not getting.
And that's a great segue to talk a little bit more about your show. You launched it in 2005, I believe. Can you talk about that process of starting your own show? And I mean, being on for 15 years is incredible. And talk a little bit about what type of guests you're bringing on as well.
Well, we started I moved to central Pennsylvania, where all of my Teamster buddies were talking about how the union wasn't doing us any good, how we'd make more money if there were no union here. And they were basically spouting, the Limbaughs, the Hannitys, all down the list, because it's what they were hearing. So it was my goal, my hope, to add some bit of balance, because you go across this country, talk radio is dominated overwhelmingly by conservative voices. In fact, the Center for American Progress did a study back, I guess it's been about 10 years now, that showed 90% of all talk radio, they said was conservative. And you go, what does that leave for anything else? There isn't much else, because truth be told, they've bought it up. They invested in the infrastructure and they own the medium. So it was my thought is, hey, how can I add a little balance? So I, along with a couple of other friends, said, let's start something. So we started on a Sunday afternoon on one local radio station, just for an hour on Sunday, talking about labor and economic issues. And that's grown to now we do 2 hours every night. We do a nationwide TV show. We're launching a new venture with ThinkSpot. We're getting the message where we can to engage people on, how is it that we've been robbed for the last 45 years? How is it that we've lost $2.5 trillion of wealth each and every year? Now we're on 20 stations across the country and all these platforms, and grown more than I could have ever imagined. But it still needs to be more, and we still need to expand, because look, at the end of the day, the conservative message dominates. The corporate message dominates. And what the corporate message keeps telling us is, don't ask for too much, just be happy you got a job.
So about the Labor Radio Podcast Network, how did you hear about it? What was the process of becoming part of it? And why do you think such a network is important going forward?
I think it's important because you need to have a collective of minds. You need to have people doing a variance of different things. This is something that I've talked about doing and wanted to have happen for, probably 14 of the 15 years that I've been doing this. Because again, we're not reinventing the wheel. You look at what the right has done, and the right has done it masterfully. They have taken what used to be labor's basic organizing, and they've really, really improved on it. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, the little snot from the Christian Coalition. But he was
Ralph
being
Reed, or
there you go, Ralph Reed.
Yeah.
He was being interviewed, and he was asked, how did you build the Christian Coalition? How did you build it into the power that it is? And he pulled out the SWOC handbook, the Steelworkers Organizing Committee's handbook. And he said, this is what we did. We did what organized labor did. And for me, what we're doing here, what the Labor Radio Podcast Network is basic organizing. And it's hearkening back to what labor unions have done in the past. Understand, labor's owned radio stations. They wrote books, pamphlets. You name it, they were doing it. In fact, 1952, the Wall Street Journal opined that the labor press was so powerful that they thought that the labor press could sway the election from Eisenhower to Stevenson. That was 1952. That was a whole nother era. But if you're going to want to get back to those, you got to start with talking to people. And I know this is going to really upset some labor leaders, but labor has stopped talking to their members. And we've got to get back to it. We've got to be in their ear all the time, because you know what has happened? The Limbaughs, the Hannitys, all of them, they're in our members' ears. They're in our brothers and sisters' ears 24/7. It's not just going to a meeting. It's not just sending out a newsletter. It's not, hey, there's a phone call every once in a while. It is constant, day after day after day, 24/7. And there's got to be something to compete with that. There's got to be something that we're pointing our members to, going, hey, you want the alternative. You want to hear something else? This is where you go, which is why I think the work that you guys are doing at the Labor Radio Podcast Network is so important.
Well, you pretty much are answering my final question that I have, which is looking into the future of organized labor. Where do you see opportunity and hope?
I tell you, I got great hope in the young people of this country. The kind of organizing that I'm seeing them doing around Black Lives Matter, around women's issues, around immigration, it just blows my mind. My hope is at some point, all of that organizing that they're doing on all of these other issues comes around to the labor issue. Because at the end of the day, while all of those issues I believe are really, really important, the labor issue is still, in my view, the most important issue. I think Dr. Martin Luther King said, what's the good in being allowed to sit at the counter and have a hamburger if I can't afford to buy one? And for me, it's that economic power that's been stolen from us over the last 45 years. It's that most prosperous working class status that our grandparents left us that has been taken, and in a lot of cases surrendered for mere trinkets that we got to fight for back. And, I talk to these kids all the time who are, they're just fed up. They're not going to take it anymore. They're not going to put up with the crappier jobs, the longer hours. And I have great hope that they're going to do the hard work of organizing. They're going to use social media and all of the tools of the future that you and I probably don't even understand yet. And they're going to leave for my kids and my grandkids something pretty good.
Rick Smith, thank you for all the work you're doing. And I look forward to working with you in the struggle, and see you in the trenches.
Good stuff, brother. Appreciate it.
You better listen, my brother, 'cause if you do, you can hear there are voices still calling from across the years. And they're crying across the ocean, they're crying across the land, and they will until we all come to understand. None of us are free None of us are free. None of us are free. If one of us is chained, none of us are free. 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 If one of us is chained, none of us are free. There are people in darkness, they just can't see the light. If we don't say